support cessation, and vaping may be one of those, but it's not yet on the list of approved programs.
So the big idea of smoking bans in public places is second-hand smoke. Is second-hand vape as dangerous as second-hand smoke?
There's no evidence that it's as dangerous. There's no question that you inhale. Of course, there is another point to reducing smoking in public places, which is reducing people's exposure to smoking as a habit and perhaps curiosity and taking it up themselves, or triggering people who have just managed to quit for the second, third, fourth, fifth time, triggering their addiction again. So it's not just the effects of second-hand or passive smoking, but that's certainly one of them.
So it's the role modelling.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
That'll do me, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you.
I want to concentrate on my questions on two parts of the policy. Firstly, 7D on page 97, smoking and vape-free environments prohibited within 10 metres of the Waiora CBD building, which is the old Farmers building. Why only that building and not others that are in the city? Why not other parts of the city? Why not other buildings where, say, young people go, like Zeal or some of the internet cafes and things like that?
So I guess there's two parts of that answer. So one of them is that the Waikato DHB are obviously moving into that new building, and they want to have a smoke-free area around that building. And so that was part of the discussions that we had with them. The second part of that about other parts of the city, I certainly think that there is an opportunity to, over time, is add other parts of the city to our smoke-free group and make them smoke-free areas. So I think this is maybe just a first step, and so we can start having conversations with Zeal, with other parts, other big buildings in the city, and see if they have an interest in creating a smoke-free policy, and having more smoke-free areas in the city is a good thing.
So you've brought this in specifically because of a request from the DHB. Have they offered to in any way fund or support the, in a material way, I'm talking about here, the policing of that, the enforcement of that, I'm talking about 7D, not the rest of the area?
Yeah, well, I think it would be very much the same as the rest of it. That
have they offered to support that in a material way?
They have staff that do that at the hospital already, so I think that they are looking to
do that on the hospital site, or do that out on the public streets, because this is a public street. Can you? I'm asking you quite specifically, Nick.
Sorry, can you just re-ask the question? I've gotten a bit lost in that.
Well, I'm following your words here, or yours or Ricky's. Smoke-free and vape-free environment events. Smoking and vaping is prohibited in the following places. D, within 10 metres of the Waiora CBD building. That's on the footpath and street frontage around the building. And my question to you was firstly related to why have you just picked on that one? You said because the DHB requested it. So I then asked you, did they offer to materially fund or in any other way support the enforcement of that in that area?
Yeah, and when we did have that conversation about adding the Waiora CBD building, there were suggestions that there were going to be implications in terms of council having to move people along and to that effect, and they did actually acknowledge that there will be some responsibility from when they are set up there, not currently at the moment, when they are set up there, of moving people on from that. So,
Ricky, are you aware that no one except a council or officer or a duly authorised council officer or a police person has the ability to move anyone on from a public place? That DHB staff do not have that ability? Well, I mean, legally?
Yes, I suppose in terms of the policy, we have restrictions around our ability to move people on that are smoking as well. But that's why we've tried to make sure that the policy is very much an education tool, saying, look, you are smoking. The council have determined that this particular space is one that we want to keep smoke-free. Here are some opportunities.
Yeah, but you're straying way beyond my question. DHB have offered no help there other than saying they'll look at that after they got staff there, but we acknowledge they've got no power to do anything about it anyway. So what's going to happen? You know, is council going to have officers walking through that area, talking to people who are smoking? How's it going to work?
Well, I mean, it's very much like we've got a number of smoke-free areas that we don't actually have anyone walking through telling people not to smoke. The whole idea is, as Ricky says, it's an educative policy, that it's encouraging people not to smoke in those areas. We can't force people to not smoke in those areas, but it is an education tool.
So why just outside Waiora DHB building when one of the major components of that facility, community mental health patients, given that there's quite a lot of studies that show a much higher proportion of patients with mental illness smoke than patients without mental illness. Why would you say, let's focus on that?
Well, I think it's just as health providers that they want to send a message that they would like the area around their building to be smoke-free.
And we haven't independently investigated that, we've just followed what they've said.
Oh, it's been part of a number of discussions we've had with them, and you know that's been an evolving conversation over time.
Effectively, the mental health patients there will be discriminated against more than others because they have a higher preponderance of smoking. Happy to send you some evidence about that.
Okay, so
That's only the first question. The second one over the page, 11. You've 11B repeats 7D, but 11A, Waikato, that's also banned in the area of Waikato Hospital campus, including Pembroke Street from the corner of Selwyn to Ahaupo Road and Selwyn Street surrounding Waikato Hospital. Are you aware that that is the exact area that the Henry Bennett Centre sends its patients from acute and other wards inside out to smoke, because they're not allowed to smoke on the hospital campus? Are you aware of that?
No, I wasn't. I mean, this is part of what is existing in the policy already. So this has been carried over from the existing policy.
If you're not aware of that, how come we've got a policy that's not aware of where we're not aware of the implications?
Well, I mean, that's been part of the DHB's area that's been smoke-free for a time.
I think it's part of our area, which is why we have a policy. They own up to the boundary of the road reserve, but you're talking, this is road reserve here. It's the exact same area where...
Okay, so I think you've asked your question. They weren't aware.
They're not aware, but they're
not aware.
Proposing a policy to cover that anyway, because the DHB's asked for it.
Yeah, so okay, that can come up in debate. But you asked your question and you got the answer. Okay, Councillor Tooman.
To be very well defined. Basically, you can't, smoking garden place, transport centre, DHB and Victoria on the River, and any parks and that. But once you walk out of garden place, you can light up, go down, you'll have to be pretty quick. By the time you get down to the DHB building, you're going to have to finish your cigarette. It's one of these things, I think, which there's a bit of confusion out there. And of course, with no enforcement action at all, people are just going to take no notice of it. You just got to walk through Garden Place and...
So the question is, though, please?
And the other comment is like up at the hospital area, you go up there and you see people sitting in wheelchairs with drips hanging out of their arms and they're having a smoke.
Question.
Is there any action taken by the anti-smoking police or whoever? Because we don't seem to have such a position.
So currently our City Safe staff do approach people who are smoking in Garden Place and tell them that it is a smoke-free area. So there is things happening at the moment.
And what happens if they say, yeah, that's good?
Well, as has been discussed, it is an educational policy, so it's not something that we can actually physically remove people from the area.
Currently, with the increase in price of cigarettes, I understand some of them are up around $40 a packet or something. Has there been any research done as to the number of people who have quit since then? Because, 2.5 pack and you spend $100.
I don't have that information to hand. I could probably get it for you, though, if you'd like it.
Yeah, I think it's around about, I think it's only about 15 or 16% of the population is now smoking, which is pretty low. We're getting there slowly.
Okay, so that was more of a comment, but I get your point. So I actually have one question, then I get back to you, Gary, because you've had a question, but I'll come back to you. Mine was, it sort of follows on in the sense that, and I think what I'm hearing from you is that this is not designed to impose on people, smoke here, don't smoke there. It's proposed to encourage and educate people sort of secondarily, move along. It's not, we prefer you don't smoke here, so, and that's going to change their behaviour. Is that because it's an education?
Correct.
So at the moment, how do we know, so it's been working, is it, because CitySafe asks people to move on, and presumably they sometimes do, do we know the effectiveness? I mean, I don't support smoking or any of that, but how do we know that this particular education tactic is working and that this new policy will be effective? That's one question. How do we know? It's quite hard, isn't it?
It is quite hard, and I suppose that's the purpose of attaching the action plan. So originally it was just a standalone policy, and actually coming back to the elected members on any sort of how effective this is. That's how the conversation started. Actually, we probably need to plan. We need to involve other stakeholders to try and share some of the load, and they've acknowledged that is appropriate. So when we do come back and report on an annual basis, we'll be able to probably talk to a lot of that.
Okay. Okay, because, yeah, so, I mean, I would want to feel that we can measure some of this. It's only a small part of council business, isn't it? In terms of vaping, I had a question, because shops, e-juice bars, vaping places, etc., are popping up quite a lot at the moment, and there's one in the Garden Place. So would that mean, under this policy, that people who go there would have to stay inside with their product? They couldn't be in Garden Place, just outside on his outside table chair?
Yeah, I mean, in that particular setup, they do have provision for vaping inside. My understanding is that that is correct. As soon as they walk out into Garden Place, there will be a conversation if there was staff to that effect would be in the position to say, hey, look, we've got this policy which discourages smoking and vaping in Garden Place.
Okay. So in that respect, is one of the reasons we're doing this, apart from being just one tool in the box to encourage people not to do something that is self-harming, is the other part of it around public perception and amenity. I personally never have liked having second-hand smoke blown on me. I feel marginally better about vape, but not much. I prefer that if they want to inhale, they inhale it themselves. So is part of it, what is it providing a pleasant place for other people who don't choose to smoke or vape?
Yes, I suppose in terms of vaping, obviously there is what happens, similar to cigarette, in terms of people standing next to you are also part of that space. Richard Hoskins pointed out that there are other means of trying to wane yourself off smoking cigarettes, which are not as intrusive on other people's space, I suppose. So there is that suggestion that there is a little bit of amenity as well, but also the fact that, as they highlighted, the DHB highlighted that when people are seen to smoke, other younger people will see it as something which is probably a little bit more normal, but if smoking's not seen normally, then that will help to discourage it.
Okay, so in terms of following on from Ziggy's question, and this is my last question, around signage and how this actually all works, will we get some oversight, or when will we get some oversight about how you're actually going to convey this? Because I agree with her wholeheartedly, and I'm tall. The little signs add no real value other than a sort of soft objective. There's no educational, and not smoking here doesn't educate you to anything. The only time you're educated is if it becomes uncomfortable and you have to move on. So I'm just wondering how we're going to actually do the educative component of that.
Yeah, and we will involve elected members in that process. So in terms of the signage, there's no intention upon adoption of the policy to go out and just start putting signage throughout the city, because there is a cost obviously involved in that. In conversations, as we upgraded signs throughout the city in terms of our branding, we would naturally ensure that there is some smoke-free element or vape-free element as well on that same signage. So, but there will be visibility around what the signs may look like. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry, 2 more questions. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I'm just concerned, have you been in touch with the central government, Minister of Finance in particular, to advise him we're about to create a policy that will cause a catastrophic collapse in smoking revenues?
No.
You haven't? Oh, okay.
Councillor Gallagher. So we've got a few other items to get through, so.
Yes, I mean, obviously, I don't have a problem with everything bar the reference to the Waikato Hospital. I can even understand the upper bit of Selwyn Street, you know, to Ohaupo, and I'm probably a bit more, but I've done this in my other DHB role. I do have a concern around that Henry Bennett. Now, obviously, there's been debate in DHB. I was in a minority that wanted some sort of vaping provision smoke within a campus, you know, for mental health patients. So the problem that Councillor McPherson has highlighted is the people who come out on authorised leave. And I just have a worry, while obviously you want to encourage behaviours, I have a worry that our staff are coming and intersecting with people who've left the facility, their patients, and they have a lot of other issues. So I join with Councillor McPherson in that specific area of having some...
That isn't a question, though, it's a comment.
Well, I mean, it's just, I mean, I absolutely support the thing in principle, but I'm looking at application. Obviously, there's no financial penalties, is there? What is that? No.
Okay,
Yeah.
so...
Well, through the chair, I think to a degree, and this is where I do take the point, our staff, I'm not sure what our staff are going to actually do along there.
So, question, is that a question?
Well, what will our staff do along there?
So council staff currently monitor 2 sites for smoking, which is Garden Place and the Transport Centre.
Right. So will they monitor more?
That's not the plan as part of this.
Just
Okay, so we need to test this with council now, because we've had fairly thorough go at it.
I wish to put a motion.
Yes. Okay. Okay, let's put it up and see what it says.
The addition to the staff recommendation is after the word plan and D is the subject to.
So that's just the space outside those 2 health facilities.
Yeah, that I've mentioned, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, have we got a seconder for that?
I'll second it for debate.
Okay, we are now into debate on that, unless anybody wants to propose the staff recommendation. I'll second that for debate, so
Okay.
that's an amendment. Okay.
Thanks.
So, yes, off you go, Dave.
The first thing is, I don't oppose, in fact I support, and have been one of the strongest supporters on this council in the past, of a smoke-free policy designed to stop people smoking in a way that annoys others or adds to the problem of others. However, it is a personal problem, and I also support education campaigns, treatment provision, pretty rigorous treatment provision that encourages people not to smoke, not to take up smoking, to stop smoking if they've already taken it up, and gives them the tools to do so, whether they're sort of soft tools or hard tools. I support all of those sorts of campaigns. I believe that in public places that it's a problem if you're smoking and the smoke, people get second-hand smoke. I'm much less convinced about vaping. It's a perceptual problem for sure. The clouds of smoke are even greater. But I think the jury's a little bit out on that, and I think to say it's potentially dangerous, so we better err on the side of banning it, I personally think that's a step too far. What I'm concerned about is that rather than promoting education and supporting greater treatment, we're promoting enforcement and coercion. And I have particular objection to the two areas that I've described outside the DHB facility in down the road here, and more particularly still outside Waikato Hospital campus on Selwyn and Pembroke Streets. And as I said before when I was questioning, that is the exact area where patients, compulsory patients and non-compulsory patients, acute patients and others are sent outside by DHB staff to smoke. In fact, I've personally witnessed, you all know the situation, my family situation, my son was exactly in that situation. I've personally witnessed, not just him, but other patients being told by staff, why don't you go outside for a smoke, to that point. And if they don't go all the way out onto the street, having been moved on, I've personally seen this as well, moved on by DHB security guards until they're outside the DHB premises on the side of the street. And we're saying to them now, you can't smoke there either, and someone eventually may start policing that. I think that sends the wrong message. I think that lets the real problem off the hook. The real problem is that people are smoking and that they have no other ways to calm down, and they haven't been given the education or tools to enable them to do that. The other point is that quite a lot of studies have shown there's a much higher proportion, some would suggest more than twice as high a proportion of people with mental illness who smoke. And there's a cross-addiction problem, there's a lack of self-awareness problem, there's several things mixed up in that. But the net result is that a lot more people, for instance, from Henry Bennett Centre, you will find as smokers than you will people in the maternity wards, even though there are some, you know, in other parts of the hospital, in other words. So I think that staff are trying to do the right thing, but I think they've inadvertently forgotten about looking at the consequences. And the consequences of this policy are a step too far, I think. And so I'm urging you to vote for this, which keeps the guts of the policy intact, but removes that area. If the DHB comes to us and shows a better plan for dealing with this, that's more holistic, that stops people needing to go out for a smoke, or stops people needing to have a smoke outside the farmers' building before they go inside, sort of like what Leo was talking about, then by all means, let's see how we can incorporate that into our policy. I think that this is an easy thing for them. Write to the council, get them to ban smoking outside our areas so we look better, but they don't actually say what they're doing about it. I mean, at the Henry Bennett Centre a couple of months ago, they ran out of nicotine patches for over a month. They didn't have them to supply to people. You know, it beggars description, and I think they've taken the easy way out. We shouldn't. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Bunting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a tricky one, and I appreciate your work, guys. I won't be supporting either the amendment nor the motion for, strangely enough, reasons that Dave actually argued. The issue I have is the vape-free issue. I don't think there is enough research to prove that this is actually going to help anything. In fact, from what I've read about vaping, it's actually a step away from smoking, and I'm thinking, why would we take that away from people? I hear the role modelling argument. I don't agree with the role modelling argument. Otherwise, we would be banning far more socially unacceptable things like hooning and sneezing without covering your mouth, and puffer jackets and shorts at the same time. Which have
orange jackets.
And orange jackets, absolutely, and bright blue. Yes.
Right, keep going. 'Cause
I feel that in its present form, this policy is a bladeless knife without a handle. Frankly, we can't enforce it anyway. We can put up signs, and hopefully people will see them, and hopefully people will tut enough so that people don't. People squish them out of the area. But to me, at the moment, the jury is out on vaping. I think actually at the moment it's a health issue that would be a little bit premature to ban completely. I also disagree with the smoking policy at bus stops. I don't think we're doing, people can smoke. It's not illegal to smoke. I think, yes, playgrounds, totally agree with that. But bus stops, no. So look, in its present form, I can't support either of them, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Mangai Tapora.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a bit half-hearted about supporting the policy, mainly around the vaping stuff, but a number of other things in there which I'll go into. I think one of my main concerns is that the leading cause of Māori mortality is tobacco use. So rates have remained persistently high and quit rates have not gone down at all, leading me to the idea of vaping. So qualitative research actually suggests that vaping is, by users, an effective method for quitting smoking. And I would actually recommend that we wait until central government or Ministry of Health say, yeah, this is, the research is in, the evidence is there, and it is actually not good for people at all. But my main concern is, if our smoking rates are that high and the rates are actually half the Māori population, well, Māori women anyway, are smokers, if this is a tool that's going to help them, then I'm definitely all for it. I support Councillor McPherson around we need to reconsider the areas at the Waikato DHB for all the reasons that he outlined. I'm a bit concerned that with the education, the monitoring is only really happening in 2 places. So the education will be very concentrated to the transport area and to Garden Place, but not necessarily all smokers that would require help would actually get help. I feel strongly that Pinnacle Health should be engaged as directly as a stakeholder and not through the DHB, because they are the #1 and the only provider for cessation advice, and that they should be providing the training to staff and perhaps be a bit more active around our city, not so much being enforcement but being that education arm, because that's what they're contracted to do, to my understanding. I have to say I don't support the amendment in the original motion at all, based on those reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. It's my observation that we're winning in the smoking thing. I can remember when I was a young fella, a third of my mates, I never did, but a third of my mates were smokers. And that was in a rugby club, so there's all ethnicities there. That's nothing like what it is. So I think we're winning, and I cannot for the life of me, and I know this is you're doing this with the right intentions, but I just cannot for the life of me think that this will help. And I'm not saying it won't, it'll harm me, although I do take my hat off to Dave when he pointed out the point about the guys at Henry Bennett and whatnot, so I can see that. I don't think it will harm it, but I can't see it. It's useless is too harsh a term, but it is a useless policy. It's something we openly say we can't enforce. We don't have the manpower or woman power or the ability to enforce it. We're going to try and educate people. I think there's better things for us, you guys, to be spending your time on, us to be spending a tiny amount of money on. So there's a whole lot of other things we could be doing too, don't eat donuts here because you'll get too fat or something like that, but we don't try that, and I wouldn't suggest we should, but I'm thinking it's on the same sort of level. Most doctors will tell you don't eat too many donuts or you'll get obesity or diabetes or something like that. I don't know why you're jumping up down from. Okay. Anyway, so look, I think it's done with good intentions. I just don't think it will help, and I don't think it's just one more element of complexity in all the rules and regulations we've got that I don't think we'll ever get a return on investment. Not that there will be a great deal of investment in, so I can't support it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Probably should have reduced the speaking time for something like this because we've been using the full 5 minutes. But be short and to the point would really help us get through this afternoon. Councillor Gallagher.
You asked me to be short and to the point. That is quite a significant challenge for this particular council, as you know, but I will try. The irony is not lost on me that the three people who sit round a board table and have discussed this in another room have some reservations, and I apologise to staff that I didn't perhaps have some pre-discussions, because I absolutely want to acknowledge your really great work on the policy. I will, however, be supporting the amendment, not that I oppose DHB policies to discourage smoking on the Waikato campus, etc., but I do think there's a nuance I want us to discuss further with the DHB, and I think Councillor McPherson has highlighted that nuance, and I think there is some issues and problems, and I don't want to have our staff go into an area where I think we haven't quite sorted that out. It may very well be that if we move the facility, Henry Bennett, then we come back to that. So I do support the broad intent of the smoke-free plan. I get the point about mentioning vaping, because if I'm at a bus stop or in a playground, I don't particularly want to have your second-hand smoke from vaping. But Tipora does raise, I think, a very key issue, is that I do think vaping as a means to give up smoking, and the debate is out, is it less harmful than tobacco, but I know a lot of people have moved from tobacco to vaping, and that's a journey for them. So I do acknowledge the point she has made, but I don't want to, and I support broadly the DHB policy, and I absolutely support the intent, but I don't want to put our staff in a situation of going outside the Henry Bennett and having a conversation which I think will probably be extremely unhelpful. I think there's a much deeper and bigger issue, and frankly, I think that's for the DHB to actually sort, all right? And I don't think the DHB should impose, with respect to the DHB, that issue on the council. I will be supporting the rest, but respectfully, I will be supporting Councillor McPherson in the light of his evidence that he presented to us.
Okay, thank you. That's the motion, not the amendment. Yes, information. Councillor Pascoe, I know you could be erudite with your response.
I will be very quick, if I'm allowed to speak. Look, I think this is a public partnership which is based on education, and what better partner to have in that partnership for us than the DHB. I believe that Councillor McPherson's concerns about the Henry Bennett Centre can best be dealt to by the DHB, simply, in my mind, by setting up a designated smoking area, as they do in airports and other places which are generally smoke-free areas. So I don't see the issue around the cordon that is being suggested here to be unworkable. In fact, what I think the boldness of the DHB asking to be included in the policy is that I hope it might bring other players, other landowners around the city to the table and ask also to be included in the smoke-free policy. So I think over time we might find further additions of particular areas of the city that want to be associated with this educational partnership. So for that reason, I'm supporting, I think it's the amendment now, isn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
I came into today's talk quite open-minded on this issue. I'd support either the amendment or the motion, because I think either are a step in the right direction. I acknowledge that in some ways it's seen as a bit token in that we can't enforce it, but just because we can't enforce something doesn't mean we shouldn't send a message to the public. There's often protocols and etiquette in different parts of our society which aren't enforced, but they're expected. And I think as council, as leadership, we need to set an expectation and an example. So I think either sends a good message and upgrades our existing policy. I think vaping looks terrible, irrespective of the health benefits, and from a perception point of view, I don't want to endorse its excessive use. Counter to Councillor Mark, wouldn't want my kids at a bus stop surrounded by smoke, so I support that as well. And although, I'm leaning more towards supporting the motion, and although I might have different reasons than Councillor McPherson for removing the DHB motions, I think if we start showing bias towards cherry-picking certain things, we could have McDonald's and KFC and other people approach us in terms of setting boundaries, and it becomes, you think this is a token policy. Imagine till we get all those little boundaries and nuances in there. So I think it's cleaner if we keep it as a council-only operated thing. But I do take Councillor Robb's point in that we do need a partner. I just think our policy needs to be clear from a geographical point of view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Stay brief. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And Gary took the words right out of my mouth, you know. Well, how about the signs about donuts? Totally agree with that. Where are they? I agree with Councillor Hamilton, because it's really, let's just keep it where we are, keep it Garden Place, Civic Square, and Victoria on the River. That's our places where we want our people to go to, where we want smoke-free. I don't know about vaping. I'm the same probably as some others. I don't like even the look of it. And I do not want my children around that either. Nor do I want to be around that, even if it might be totally healthy, might come out being totally healthy. It's just the look doesn't look right. It's not great. So for me, I'm probably going with the motion, with Councillor McPherson's motion, and just keep it in-house. I mean, I just looked at statistics, and yes, smoking does cause a lot of problems. I totally agree with that. But, apparently diabetes is winning, and killing people, and high blood pressure as well. So there's a few other things that are problems besides smoking. So, if we do something, well, let's just actually show the people, because it hasn't actually. People don't see it. Like I just said before, I see people smoking Garden Place and standing right underneath the sign. So let's make it a little bit more visual, but maybe in a more innovative way, if we've got the money for it. Thank you.
Mangai Oli.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Some good debate points there. I'll be supporting the motion. I agree with the collaborative effort that's being put into developing the smoke-free plan. Looking forward to that being reported back in 12 months' time to see how effective it's been, and hear clearly what Councillor McPherson and the Deputy Mayor have been saying with regards to items 7D and 11A, 11B.
Okay, thank you. I'm the seconder of the amendment, but that was to allow an option to go forward should that be the case. I have been actually moved by some of the debate in terms of keeping our focus to our properties and things that we can genuinely take ownership of, rather than the health board environment, which is their concern. Having said this, don't forget, I'm not really persuaded by the enforcement versus educate, because this is an education program. It's not an enforcement program. It's there principally to educate and move people away from unhealthy life habits. But I totally agree with Councillor Hamilton. I don't want to be at a bus stop with a whole lot of smokers. I don't want any of my children or anybody else's children exposed to second-hand smoke, which we do know already is very harmful. Same in public spaces, outside the libraries and so on. I have to say, in terms of vaping, yes, there isn't enough evidence yet. There wasn't a lot of evidence about the perils of smoking in the first place, so I accept that argument. But I think that there is another portion of people we have to consider, and that's the general public, who should be able to wander around Garden Place without having to walk through somebody else's cloud of vape, whatever smell, flavour, tone it's taking at the time. I don't want to breathe it in. I've been at a concert recently when a gentleman was three rows forward and he was a constant cloud coming. We had to kind of move. All right, his personal choice is his personal choice. It shouldn't be imposed on me. So we've got to set the line somewhere, as you're right, Councillor Hamilton. We've got to show some leadership and say, you know, we don't really think this is the wise behaviour for you, so this is what I'm saying. Let's, however, improve the way that we're communicating that, because I think we all agree that the small don't do it here signs are not really educative in any way. So I think we need to work with experts to find out how we communicate to people why we're suggesting they don't smoke there. So even though I have seconded yours, I'm probably going to vote for the motion. Pardon? Oh, yeah. Okay, I was just thinking whether I'd withdraw my seconding, but no, right to reply.
Look, firstly, my apologies for being slightly emotional before. Try and be more objective, but I do need to, update Councillor Robb on one point in particular. He suggested that the ideal solution for the area around the hospital was for them to provide a designated smoke-free area. The news, Rob, is that just over about 18 months ago, Councillor Gallagher and I on the DHB tried to do exactly that. We got 2 votes for our proposal and the rest were against. The DHB refused to do that. The coroner in my son's case recommended that all DHBs do that. That's one of the items that they have complained to the Solicitor General about. So I don't think there's any intent for them to keep the problem within their own boundaries, shall we say. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We will go to the vote. We put the amendment first. The amendment goes first. So if the amendment is the one that Pasco and myself moved to get through to the debate, I'm going to vote against it in myself. Okay? So if you're supporting the motion, you vote against the amendment. Yeah? I know it's peculiar, but I've also voted against it. Okay, where are we at? Okay.
The amendment is lost.
So now that we've got the motion, this is Dave's. Oh, we do.
The motion is carried, 9-4, 2 against.
Thank you very much, and good luck to staff and also to the DHB and advocates in making this work. Thank you for coming in. Thank you. Okay, we're going to crack on, councillors, because really, because of the Western Town Belt, we've kind of swallowed a large amount of time. Some of the items can be taken for information. That doesn't mean you don't care about them. It means you should have read them and have any very short questions at hand. And that certainly applies to the next one, which is the schedule of reports. Thank you. Moved to Councillor Tooman. Seconded Councillor McPherson. Does anybody get any questions? If you do, come to me on another day. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh, that was good. No. Yeah, sorry. I did. Hang on, whoa. I looked ahead, so I was actually doing the schedule of reports when I spoke to it. So let's just wind back. Sorry, civil defence. I actually verbalised that we were voting on the schedule of reports, which was incorrect. I know. So, civil defence moved, Councillor Tooman, seconded, Councillor Henry, seconded. Are there any questions now? And I apologise for that muck-up, it's been a long day. Any questions on the civil defence matters? If not, we'll put it to the vote. Okay, we'll put it to the vote, and if you do have questions, I invite you to talk to staff, because it is actually a very important issue, and we should engage with it. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. And you know what? Next time we're going to put you further up the agenda. Thank you. That would be really good. Yeah, and thank you for being so patient and waiting. We appreciate it. Schedule of reports. I'm sure this is going to go through in the same speedy speed. Councillor Bunting moved. Ollie second. All in favour? Carried. Okay. So now we're on to something that's a tiny little bit tricky. We're on to the item around the Boone Festival. And I just want to make it quite clear, because there's a part coming up in PX, that all we're talking about at this moment, nothing to do with the design or anything else, is whether, in principle, we support this building that we're sitting on, the outside wall, to be used for a Boone Street piece of art. Not what it is or any other questions. So it's only on principle. You should have read the report. Is there anything you particularly need to highlight? No? Not at all, I think. This is for the public part, public excluded part, so please don't be sharing that right now. Okay, so nothing to highlight?
No, Boone would have been here, but they unfortunately couldn't make it. They were scheduled to come to the last meeting, but because it was moved, they were unable to come today.
Okay. So in principle, Councillor Bunting, you've got a question.
One, if this goes up and there is need to put a banner over the top of it, heaven knows why, but can we still do that?
I think there would be probably something that wouldn't be considered. I mean, I guess it's possible in principle, but there are other options that H3 could use. They're the only people that use that site, so they probably wouldn't consider doing that.
I think like a World Cup or that sort of stuff.
I mean, in theory, it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, usually the banners are sort of come across horizontally and are quite narrow, and I'm not sure how that could work with the space.
Big square
but
ones.
say if they did a full thing, in theory, it's possible. Yeah.
I can help you, councillor. So the booking of that banner is actually done through our unit, and it's quite a long portrait-shaped one, a vertical size. So I think Joe's largely correct. H3 are the only consistent users, really. And in answer to Councillor Bunting's point, don't think we're in line for too many World Cups in the immediate future.
No, I get that, but I was just wondering if we are losing a potential, communication site.
Yeah, I did speak to H3 about that, and they said, although that it's a shame to lose it in a way, it's not something that they would be terribly worried about. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all
Any
I have.
further questions? Then not. So I'd like to move the staff recommendation. Second, thank you. Any debate? I don't think I need to debate it in this. I'll debate it shortly. But I think it's very exciting, some of the Boone Street stuff that's just about to happen. Enough said. Okay, let's go to the vote on that one, please. Voting for it. There's just in principle that there'll be a Boone Street artwork there. Thank you. Thank you.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Well, it's not the content of the drawing, I mean. So a Boone Street mural will be going up there now. When we go into public excluded, we'll talk further. Okay? Is that fair enough? You're right, I shouldn't say principle. Yes. Oh, okay. So we're resetting. And Leanne's right to correct my slightly loose language, but what I was suggesting is we're only talking about whether the mural can go up or not. It's not in principle. It will happen if you press the yes button. So we're voting now. Resetting because somebody poked the wrong thing.
The motion is carried unanimously.
All right, exciting. Thank you, everyone. Now we'll move a resolution to exclude the public. Councillor Bunting, Councillor Hamilton, all in favour? Opposed, carried. And there isn't any public here other than the presenters.